Good evening, everybody. How are you? This is Mark Vines, and welcome to the Mark Vines Show. And tonight, I want to talk to you about leadership and really ask the question, why do many competent people fail to become leaders? Now, in the first few episodes of the Mark Vines Show, we talked about some of the leadership failures in the FBI, but we've also talked about the police world, but we're just going to talk about the world in general right now. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I was in my home office the other day, just minding my own business, just sitting there not bothering anyone at all. And the next thing I knew, my wife came up to me and said, "Here, I want you to read this." I said, "Well, what's that?" She said, "I just want you to read it. It's got some good information in it." And those of you that have been married a long time, and I've been married for 31 years, been with the same woman for about 33 years now. I know this, just like a lot of you, that when my wife says to me that she wants me to read something, there's got to be some sort of an ulterior motive to why she wants me to do that. Because A, it stuns me that she's talking to me at all, and B, she must be trying to tell me something. And I read the article, and I thought it was pretty good. Not really sure why she gave it to me, but we will go through this article, and maybe you can explain to me why it is that she gave it to me. But I thought it was very good. Now, to back up a little bit, like I mentioned, I've been with my wife for 31 years, been together 33 years, and we met in college. We went into the Navy together, and my wife retired as a Navy commander and then actually worked for the FBI for a period of time, and then now she works for another agency. Now, here's what you need to know about my wife. She became a military officer in the mid-1980s, just around the same time I became a naval officer. But for the folks that are out there that may not know much about the military or about the workplace, I will tell you that the mid-1980s was a lot more unfriendly to women in the workplace than the military is today. So my wife was, to a large extent, sort of a pioneer in the fact that she went into the military and was an officer and really helped lay the groundwork for the workplace for a lot of the women that are out there today. It was much harder for her to succeed. And on top of that, my wife is a minority as well. So whatever challenges are faced out there today, it was even more so for my wife. But here's what I'm going to tell you. My wife is wickedly competent at her job, even now, but even then. And she was a force to be contended with. All 110 pounds of her, 4'11", very tiny, very diminutive, very quiet in a lot of regards. But I'll just tell you this, that a lot of people that I worked with and worked for, senior officers, would come up to me at dinner parties and other parties and different functions that we had to go to back in those days. And they would come up to me and they'd say, "Hey, Mark, let me tell you something. Your wife is the best naval officer I've ever had work for me." I had one say to me, "If I had 2 officers in my squadron like your wife, I wouldn't need anybody else." She is hands down the most competent officer I have ever worked with. And that was just fantastic. And I was so happy for her. And I was glad that that was recognized. And I think that when my wife got hold of this article and saw this, and she 30 years later reflects upon her career and the careers of women around her, it made her think and reflect. And she gave me this article, and I thought it was very interesting, and it prompted a lot of thinking on my part. And I wanted to share this with you. And I'm going to link to this on the Mark Vines Facebook site. So if you're interested in this more, or if you want to get a copy of the book that we're going to talk about in this podcast, please feel free to do that. I'll be posting that again on the Mark Vines podcast site. And this is written by a man named Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic. Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic. And here's what he has to say. He says, "My latest book touched a nerve, generating passionate comments and reactions. It's a book that people seem to love or hate, especially when they haven't read it. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go out and get a copy of this book so you can read it and make up your own opinions. And then I'm going to ask you that if you agree or disagree or violently disagree, well, not violent, but I mean if you want to use violent words on the Facebook site, you go right ahead and do that. But we don't want any actual violence here, not at all. You go ahead and post that. But he goes on to say this. This is arguably because of the title. Why so many incompetent men become leaders and how to fix it. That's the name of the book, which has led people, usually men, to complain about the needless provocation of having the word men in lieu of the more neutral and politically correct people. Their argument is that the gender war is already divisive enough to throw more gasoline to the fire than it would have been for far more constructive to expose human rather than male incompetence. After all, they reasoned, in leadership as in any domain of talent, the only defensible goal, both from a moral and mediocrity perspective, is to pick the best candidate for the job, irrespective of their gender. I agree, that would be nice, but how often does this happen? What large group, organization, or system do you know where a person is more likely to get to the top based on their competence, humility, and integrity than on their political skills, shrewd manipulation tactics, or confidence, not to mention privilege, nepotism, and prejudice? Outside professional sports and the world of exceptionally talented artists, this is unusual. Whenever I visit an organization, I ask employees a simple question. Do most people here get to the top on the basis of their merit, talent, hard work, job performance, and natural contribution to the organization? The typical response is laughter, and I know from my own personal experience that to be the case. He goes on to say that objectors to my book title have also been reminding me, presumably because of their own traumatic experiences with female bosses, or perhaps because they are uncomfortable with the notion that the universal overrepresentation of men at the top of any hierarchy may not be caused by their superior leadership skills, that there are also incompetent women who become leaders, not just men. This is true. However, compared to men, it is significantly harder for women to become leaders when they are incompetent. Thanks to sexism, unqualified, inexperienced, inept, and poor-performing employees are less likely to be considered for leadership roles when they are female. In every society and organization, the tolerance threshold for incompetence just happens to be higher when leaders are male, and many of the common qualities underpinning incompetent leadership, arrogance, overconfidence, and narcissistic personality, are not as widely tolerated in women, but often celebrated in men. So if our goal is to boost gender equality, perhaps we should make it easier for incompetent women to become leaders. Since lots of leaders are incompetent, and most of them are men, from a fairness and social justice standpoint, the right thing to do would be to put in place measures that enable mediocre women to rise to the top as frequently as their male counterparts do. Absurd as this may sound, it would actually be consistent with specific scientific research showing that women must be more qualified, experienced, and talented to be considered for the same position as men, something that surely counts as the bright side of sexism. Sexism, which usually means chauvinism, can be found in every society. But the more prejudiced and biased a society is against women, the more qualified women will need to be to emerge as leaders in that society. In that sense, the upside to sexism resembles the upside to strict immigration policies. When you make it really hard for people to immigrate and to emigrate, you will end up attracting a much stronger talent pool of migrants because they will self-select for extraordinary levels of drive, resilience, and intelligence. Making it easier for incompetent women to become leaders would also be congruent with research showing that women are less likely to apply for jobs, including leadership roles, when they are underqualified. Or that, compared to men, women are less likely to lean in unless they actually have the talents to back it up. Or that, compared to men, women are less likely to display inflated levels of confidence that are not grounded in actual competence. And when they do, they are more likely to be found out than men. Thus, if our objective is to have a more egalitarian and equal society, we may want to make it easier for mediocre or inept women to rise to the top, democratizing incompetence across gender. Perhaps this is why a great deal of popular advice, some of it well-meaning, seems so focused on helping women to emulate the average man, encouraging women to spend more time on self-promotion, faking, confidence, and leaning in even if they can't back it up. The message here is quite clear. Women of the world, if you want to succeed, just learn to act like incompetent men. For it is clearly a winning formula. And by the way, if you don't, you only have yourself to blame. Likewise, when organizations focus their leadership selection strategies on gender rather than talent, they end up promoting women to leadership roles who mostly replicate the typical profile of incompetent leaders, outmailing men in masculinity. This is why it is easier for women to become leaders when they are bold, narcissistic, and aggressive than when they are competent. But perhaps a better option would be just to make it harder for incompetent men to become leaders. Instead of implementing positive discrimination policies that help less able women get to the top, we could just adopt merit-based criteria to discriminate against candidates, male and female, who are not competent, or at least stop positively discriminating in favor of men, especially when they are incompetent. In short, the best way to achieve equality is to improve the quality of our leaders. If we focus on quality, we boost equity. This means not making it easier for women to get to the top when they have talent, but harder for men when they lack it. The biggest career obstacle for competent women who want to become leaders is the lack of career obstacles for incompetent men. So instead of lowering the bar for women, we should raise the bar for men. Instead of asking women to behave like men, we should ask men to behave like women. If we want to make it easier for competent people, both men and women, to become leaders, we must make it harder for incompetent men to rise to the top. So, in short, this seemingly annoying question asked in the title of my book is just the answer to another question. Why do many competent people fail to become leaders? Now, I'm going to go ahead and post a link to that book, and it raises a very important question, and that is that, it really has been much easier for men to rise to the top when they're incompetent. And we see that across the workplace, certainly in the profession that I've been in, where aggressiveness, narcissism, bullying to a lot of degrees is rewarded. And that does not necessarily reflect competence. And, the last number of podcasts that I've had have discussed the problems that's created in the organizations that I've worked for. It's created many of the problems that we've had in police forces and companies across the country. And he raises a very good point here, and it's something that I have seen over the years as well. And that is, being in a very male-dominated career, military, police, corrections, the FBI, the careers that I've been in, where women have been breaking through. And I've experienced that. I've seen a lot of the breakthroughs of women in the workplace. There's a lot of firsts that have occurred in regards to women over the years while I've been in the profession. And I've noticed a trend, and he mentions this in his book and in this article here, that a lot of the women that I see feel as though for them to succeed, they must act more like men than men. And I've always been intrigued by that because I've never understood why competence couldn't just be realized and not celebrate the differences between men and women. For you to come into my workplace, to come into the FBI, you don't have to be a man. You don't have to be a man to be a police officer or corrections officer or any of the career fields that one would take. It just seems that as we move forward in the society, that we need to really recognize the competence and find a way to recognize that competence and to be yourself. If you're a woman, be a woman and act like a woman and rely upon your talents in order to get ahead. Because my wife was able to do that, and she did a fantastic job, had a fantastic career in the military, but never once tried to have anybody be confused about the fact that she was a woman. She was very much a woman, but very much competent at the same time. On the flip side, folks, if you're in a leadership position today and you're looking to bring people forward and mentor people to come up, stop rewarding mediocrity in men. We need the best talent. We need the best leaders that we can get out there. And that is what we need to strive for. And that will help equal the playing field and level the playing field in our society. We need competent people, but please be yourself as well. So I hope you found this interesting, and I hope that you found that this was helpful for you. Please check out the Mark Vine Show Facebook site, and I look forward to seeing your comments, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care. This is Mark Vines from the Mark Vine Show, and we will see you soon. Take care. Have a good night.